Everybody who has ever watched The Wire probably knows who, and to some extent what, the character of Stringer Bell is all about. More so than they do any other character on the show for that matter. However, that isn't to say that everybody's opinion on the character is the same, because it ain't. And if you do a little digging, you'll actually find that Stringer Bell is arguably the most misunderstood character on the entire show. There are those who see Stringer as this master manipulator, pulling all the strings and responsible for running the entire Barksdale operation. And there are those who see Stringer as the businessman who tried to reform his side of the drug game, when in actuality he's neither, and can somewhat best be described as exactly what Avon describes him as in Season 3.
You know what, I look at you these days, you know what I see? I see a man without a country. Not hard enough for this right here. And maybe, just maybe, not smart enough for them out there.
Not hard enough?
No offense, I don't think you ever really were.
Now the not hard enough part, I actually don't quite agree with Avon, as I never saw Stringer as somebody who wasn't hard. Rather, he was just more focused on his business dealings than he was with what were happening on the street. Shit, in Season 1, I actually thought Stringer came across as harder than Avon, as don't forget, he was one of the 4 that were a part of the most horrific death on the show. It's a shame everybody remembers Bell as the man he was in Season 3, as if you were to describe Stringer as not hard enough for the street, to somebody who had only seen the show's first season, they'd probably think you were out in the pit injecting that WMD. Avon's description of Stringer as a businessman, however, that being that he isn't smart enough for the likes of the legal world, I did agree on. And to me, such was made clear as early as Season 1, as despite it being a mistake made in the illegal world, Stringer proves to us that he isn't as smart as we thought, and that he lacks the ability to truly see all the pieces of the puzzle, something a successful businessman does not.
This cash got us caught up.
I know, man. That's my fault, man. Bay and Savino came to me with the idea that, yo, if they take Orlando, they can take the cash too. I was like, all right, y'all get your payday.
Yo, how the fuck is Orlando gonna front this type of cash? What it say?
I know, man. I know, I fucked up. I know.
Now, Stringer wasn't always a gangster pretending to be a businessman, or at least he wasn't so in your face about it until late Season 2, which is where we see him interact with Prop Joe for the second time, who treats Stringer as if he's something other than a gangster, a businessman who operates in the street. And this treatment has some profound effect on Stringer, as in his very next scene he drops a speech about why CEOs get paid so much money. He starts comparing himself to the likes of real businessmen. Now, I'm not saying that Prop Joe changed Stringer Bell's entire character, rather he was just the first person who treated Stringer as the businessman he deep down always believed himself to be, and dare I say, gave him the courage to fully come out, and both embrace the persona of a businessman operating in the street, and to try play his hand in a world he thought he was built for. And such a belief was actually hinted at as early as the show's pilot episode. We see Stringer dressed in a fancy suit and tie, subtly pretending to be something other than a gangster scaring the ever-living shit out of all of those in the courtroom. The beginning of Season 3, Stringer has now fully embraced his new persona, and he's introduced holding a meeting with all his subordinates and sharing ideas with one another, as if they're all a part of some legitimate company. Shamrock is even shown reading Robert's Rules of Order, which we're led to believe is where Stringer got the blueprint on how to run this very meeting, hence the whole chair and giving the floor shtick. However, Stringer proves to us later in the meeting when he snaps out at Pooh, that his whole businessman in the street persona is exactly that, a persona. Stringer's trying to pretend to be something he ain't, and all it takes for him to return back to the gangster we all knew in Season 1 is for somebody to challenge his newly found beliefs on the game. And Clay Davis calls him out on this later on.
I don't know why we gotta wait 3 years for that shit. I'm ready to run now.
No, you're not. I mean, forgive me, but you still showing a little bit of that street corner mentality.
Now, in all fairness to Stringer, the street mentality Clay refers to is the same mentality that got Stringer so far in the street. However, it isn't what's going to get him far in the legal world, and it proves to be a poisonous mentality Stringer is simply incapable of losing. It's what I would argue to be his Achilles heel. The belief that just because you're successful in the street means you'll also be successful outside of it. And it's why I get so bugged when people say that the likes of Marlowe has what it takes to become successful in a world outside of the street. Because he doesn't, as he too possesses that everything can be solved with violence mentality, which in the legal world won't get you nowhere but jail.
So you finna go hit a state senator now, huh? Yo, you kill a downtown nigga like that, the whole world gonna stand up and take notice. I'm talking about the state police, federals, all of that.
Now this next point has already been discussed in another video. However, I wanted to give my own take so to better prove the point I'm trying to make with this video. Which is that those who pretend to be something they're not can only last so long before their true self comes back to bite them. And no better character proves this point than the character of Wallace B. Jordan, who, if you didn't already know, shares a fate identical to that of Stringer Bell. You see, Wallace also tried to play his hand in a world outside of his own, as he was given the confidence by D'Angelo to think that he was capable of a life outside of the street, same as how Stringer was given the confidence by Prop Joe to think he was built for the world of property development. Wallace eventually proves that such isn't true, however, and that he's just pretending to be something he ain't. His past actions eventually catch up to him, and he finds himself cornered and begging for mercy, pleading with those who he left with no choice but to take him out. Exactly like how Stringer was cornered by Omar and Brother Muzone, because of stuff he did during his time in the street.
You a smart little motherfucker. You start back up at Emerson, you likely to finish up at Harvard or some shit like that. Believe, B.
Avon a soldier. That's who you want with you when the shit fly. As far as business go,
I don't think I'm cut out to be no country ass nigga, man.
Yeah. They saw your ghetto ass coming from miles away, nigga.
Yo, I'm a nigga, yo.
What y'all niggas want, man? Huh?
The relationship between Stringer and D'Angelo is something I haven't really seen anybody attempt to explain. It's obvious that there's an underlying beef the two have with one another, but what isn't so obvious is the why. Why is Stringer Bell so jealous of D'Angelo Barksdale? And it all goes back to before even the show's pilot. You see, Stringer is the second in command to Avon Barksdale, and he's worked hard to find himself in that role. However, because of D'Angelo, that's all Stringer will ever be. A second and only ever a second. A pretender to the throne. As the true heir is that of D'Angelo, somebody Stringer can't stand and deems a liability. However, Avon doesn't want to hear about it, always telling String that D is family, and that he can practically do whatever he wants without consequence. A courtesy that doesn't fully extend to the likes of Bell, who has been by Avon's side since before D was even born. Now, it isn't D'Angelo being the heir that so much bothers String. More so it's the fact that D'Angelo is somewhat a better leader. He ups the money earned in the pit and makes a lieutenant out of both Bodie and Pooh, who later become assets to Stringer Bell. And it's why you see String take every opportunity he can to come down to the pit and personally berate D, punish the man he secretly fears, as one day D might be above him in the organisation, and actually prove himself to even be a better asset than Stringer, the total opposite of the liability he was made out to be. Stringer isn't just jealous of the fact that D is heir to a throne he hopes to sit on one day, but he's also jealous of the fact that D is actually better than him in certain areas. The episode after Stringer Bell is killed, Jimmy and Bunk search his apartment, and McNulty comes across a book called The Wealth of a Nation, which for those who don't know, is essentially a book about how the desire to fulfill one's own goal will also benefit that person's society. Essentially, Stringer wanting to sell product without going to war for territory, so to fulfill his own desires and earning more money and not having to worry about the BPD, also benefits his community. And The Wire highlights this book so that people can further understand Stringer Bell's ideology. However, and call me crazy, I don't believe Stringer has ever actually read The Wealth of a Nation. He may understand the basics of what it's about, but I don't believe he's ever actually read it. Shit, the guy has katanas on his wall. You think he's ever used those? No. It's all a part of the persona. He's trying to pretend to be something he ain't, as if he had read all the books supposedly not just for display. He wouldn't have gotten played so easily by the likes of Brother Moo's own, a wordsmith who we see reading a book in practically every scene he's in. Essentially, I'm not saying that the book isn't significant, as what Stringer was doing with the co-op was somewhat benefiting society, and to put an end to Stringer would also mean to put an end to all the renovation he was doing in West Baltimore. However, when McNulty drops a "who was I chasing" line, don't be fooled into thinking that Stringer Bell was secretly some intellectual, whose ultimate goal was the betterment of Baltimore. Rather, he was just a pretender, who thought that attending a few economics classes and owning the mandatory books needed for the upcoming assignment was all it would take for him to be able to run with the likes of Clay. But that's just my opinion. Stringer was a gangster who pretended to be a businessman and got played, as well as a pretender to the throne envious of the real heir.
Well, all I'm saying is...
I understand perfectly well what you're saying. What I am saying to you is, I will take care of them myself.
Them? Who came at you?